All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to reframe family businesses today, moving them away from this idea of being just a sentimental, quaint niche and looking at them as the most dominant, structurally complex form of enterprise on Earth. We often talk about family businesses like they're this artisanal little corner of the economy. But literally, from the United States to Japan, they remain the absolute most common way human beings organize commercial activity. And if you happen to run one, well, it's really easy to feel like your problems are entirely unique to your family's specific dynamic. But actually, they aren't. They're completely structural. So today, we're going to unpack Professor Maurizio Bragagni's brilliant framework for transporting these everyday challenges into massive, long-term opportunities.
So here's how we're going to break down the Bragagni method. We'll start by defining the default operating system, and then we'll build up through three core pillars: the foundation, structure, and finally, people.
Let's jump right into section 1, the default operating system. Because before we can even look at those three pillars, we really have to define the core logic of these enterprises. I mean, if you want to fix a software bug, you first have to understand the operating system it's running on, right?
There is a quote that hits the nail on the head here. The family business is a permanent negotiation between two institutions that will outlive any of the individuals conducting it. And this just brilliantly illustrates that your business problems are not unique family dramas. They are predictable, structural design flaws that require, well, permanent negotiation. A family business isn't just a company that happens to be owned by relatives. It's the overlap of two completely different worlds. When it's conducted well, this negotiation produces the most patient, purposeful capital in the world. But conducted badly, you get the oldest cliche in commerce, built in one generation, run in the second, and totally lost in the third. And here is where things get really tricky. It's this dual logic premise. The business side runs purely on contribution. It constantly asks, what have you delivered? But the family side, that runs unconditionally on belonging. It asks, who are you to us? Now, neither of these questions is wrong, but the damage happens when one question is answered with the other. It's like treating a shareholding as a job description. When an uncle's lack of performance at work is excused simply because he's family, or a cousin feels entitled to a senior management role just because of her last name, you're answering a business question with a family logic. And honestly, that right there is the root of all the chaos. Okay, moving on to our first pillar, the foundation. And by foundation, we are talking specifically about trust and cash. We have to ground the business in absolute reality because these are the two non-negotiable currencies that actually keep the doors open. Now, trust isn't just some warm, fuzzy feeling. It is actual collateral built on four specific components. Trust was literally the original technology of business, long before contracts ever existed. But you have to break it down. First, authority. That isn't just a fancy title on an org chart, it's earned out in the field. Then, integrity. This is literally your willingness to lose money rather than break your word. If you haven't paid a price for your integrity, you haven't actually proven it. Next is competence, which is just the absolute baseline. You can't be trusted to do what you physically cannot do. And finally, the time horizon. When a listed company makes a promise, it's usually bounded by the CEO's tenure. But when a family business makes a promise, it spans decades. That generational patience is a massive structural advantage, provided you don't squander it by chasing short-term quarterly trends. Here is a fascinating reality check for you. Highly profitable companies can and do still go bankrupt. Why? Because profit is just an accounting opinion, but free cash flow is a bank balance fact. Think about the word bankrupt. It actually comes from the Italian banca rutta, meaning a broken bench. Back in the marketplace days, if a merchant couldn't pay, their physical bench was literally smashed to pieces. And what breaks the bench is almost never a lack of profit, it's a lack of cash. Profit is just a judgment call made after allocations and depreciation. Cash is what actually clears the bank. You can be wildly profitable on Monday and completely insolvent by Friday if all your profit is tied up in unpaid invoices while your payroll is due. So to apply the Bragagni method here, you've got to manage your cash using three absolute disciplines. First, look at how your customers actually pay, not what their contract says. If they agree to 30 days but always take 60, you need to forecast for 60. Second, you have to understand that a truly great year can bankrupt you because rapid growth consumes massive amounts of cash for materials and labor long before you ever get paid. And third, and this is absolutely vital, separate the family's cash from the company's cash. You need a written, agreed-upon dividend policy in place before anyone actually needs the money, so no one treats the company like an ad hoc ATM for their personal lifestyle. All right, and that brings us to pillar 2, structure. The key here is structure before sentiment. Informality works just fine when it's just the founder making decisions at the kitchen table. But as families compound and you add a second generation and multiple branches, the math starts working against you. The Tagliuri and Davis model illustrates this perfectly with 3 overlapping circles: family, ownership, and management. And this model proves that most family business conflict isn't personal at all. It's positional. It completely depends on where someone sits in these overlapping circles. Think about it. You might have an external investor, a non-family manager, a family member who just owns shares, and then a family member who works in the business and on shares. All of them define success completely differently. The shareholder outside the business wants high dividends right now. The family manager wants long-term career progression. They aren't being difficult. Their structural incentives are just entirely different. Goodwill might make these conversations polite, but only structure makes them resolvable.
Because of those overlapping circles, the most dangerous position you can be in is holding multiple roles. You have to actively practice declaring which hat you are wearing before you speak in any difficult meeting. The person right in the center of those circles, usually the one running the whole show, is at the highest risk. If you're a sibling and a manager and a shareholder, you've got to vocalize your stance. Saying something like, "Look, I'm saying this as a shareholder right now, not as your brother," might feel super awkward the first time you do it, but trust me, it will quickly become the single most useful sentence in your entire toolkit.
And your structure has to evolve over time. If we look at the ownership life cycle, stage 1 is the controlling owner. Stage 2 is a sibling partnership. Stage 3 is a cousin consortium. Most acute crises happen when transitioning between these stages, usually because the family keeps trying to operate using the governance of the stage they just left. In stage 1, the founder decides everything. It's super fast. But in stage 2, siblings are sharing control, which suddenly requires real agreement mechanisms between equals. By stage 3, you've got a whole network of cousins. Some work there, some have literally never set foot in the building. If you try to run a cousin consortium with the informal kitchen table rules of a controlling owner, you are going to fail. You have to build the institutions, like shareholder agreements and family councils, one stage before you actually need them. Finally, we reach pillar 3, people. We're talking culture and succession. Because frankly, you can have all the cash and all the structure in the world, but if you get the people wrong, the whole legacy crumbles.
There's an old, brilliant saying: an A appoints A's, and a B appoints C's. A secure leader hires people who are actually better than themselves. An insecure leader hires underperformers. An A player has absolutely nothing to prove, so they'll bring in brilliant people because it just elevates the whole company. But a B player, they feel threatened by excellence, so they'll deliberately hire a C player to ensure they never get outshined. Now, in a normal company, B players are eventually found out and fired. But in a family business, if that B player is a major shareholder or a close relative, they can't be easily removed. They will silently rot the organization from the inside out for 20 years. That is exactly why hiring judgment is the highest value skill a family leader can possibly possess.
12%. That is a pretty bleak number. It's the percentage of family businesses that actually survive to the 3rd generation. Just 12%. And PwC research shows that 43% of family businesses don't even have a succession plan. Those two numbers are intimately connected. We all intend to plan for succession eventually, but because there's rarely a hard deadline, it just gets pushed off. It gets pushed off until a health crisis, or worse, a death, forces the issue. And by then, you are no longer managing a thoughtful transition, you're managing a crisis with a coffin in the room.
So to avoid becoming part of that negative statistic, you have to treat succession as a long, deliberate process across 3 distinct levels, and you absolutely must set a hard deadline. Most families, they only ever plan for level 1, the operational side, like who's going to sit at the desk and do the daily work. But the real friction, that happens at levels 2 and 3. Management, who actually holds the authority and the relationships to make the big decisions. And finally, ownership. Who owns the shares, on what terms, and how in the world do we handle fairness among children who might have contributed completely unequally? This has to be a collaborative, intergenerational process, planned years and years in advance.
And for the founders out there, remember this: stepping back is not stepping out. The founder must actually let go, yes, but moving from the operational ring to the advisor's chair simply relocates your vast experience to exactly where it's needed most. It is terrifying for a founder to hand over the reins. But stepping back doesn't mean you just become irrelevant. You're moving from execution to counsel. You go from being a potential bottleneck in the daily operations to being the wise chair of the board who shapes the grand strategy. You're making room for the next generation to grow, while still fiercely protecting the legacy.
I want to leave you with one final, pretty provocative question to ask yourself today. Think of your business like another family member sitting at the dinner table, one that deserves your honest, undivided attention. If you were completely unable to work starting tomorrow, who signs, who decides, and who owns? And crucially, does anyone else in the family actually know? We've seen today that mastering the family business isn't about ignoring the family dynamic at all. It's about giving it the professional structure, the unshakable trust, and the transparent succession planning it truly deserves so it can thrive for generations. Take this question back to your stakeholders and start that permanent negotiation today.